Good morning, everybody. It's not easy to say something meaningful in 5 minutes. It's not easy to say a lot in 5 minutes, so I'll try to be very pointed. I'll try to quickly review the past a little bit. There's lots we can learn from the past. Often humanity is not capable of learning from the past, but obviously it's critical that sometimes we are able. Then I want to look a little bit into the future, hopefully sharing some courage and actually a positive outlook, which I believe we have reason to for. First, on the past. Have been building the UN Global Compact, which is now the world's largest corporate citizenship platform with 6,000 companies from 135 countries. And in the 10-year journey we have behind us, I think I can share the following points with you, which I believe resonate very well with what we have heard here earlier. First, the movement of the corporate idea of being more sensitive to social, environmental, and governance issues has matured in very important ways. 10 years ago, it was largely about the legitimacy, the social legitimacy in particular. 10 years ago, there was a lot of controversial approaches in this space between not-for-profit and for-profit. Today, I think there's a spirit of cooperation, a spirit of partnership. Much learning has happened. A lot of tools are available today which were not available 10 years ago. A lot of expertise is available. A lot of innovative partnerships have been built, and business in the community has been spearheading many of them as well. So the environment for collaboration, for learning from each other has improved significantly. So has the availability of specific tools. Secondly, what has also changed, 10 years ago, the call for responsibility was mostly a moral call. It was the time when it was visible to everybody that business has gone global, but governments have remained local. Therefore, business should take on some additional share of responsibility, which goes beyond what is regulated back home. And that notion of moral imperative has transformed in the meantime to what many people rightly call the material imperative. Today, it is not just a moral issue to be more sensitive and proactive on ESG, environmental, social governance issues. Increasingly, it is a material issue. And a lot of companies have important lessons to share that testify to that importance. And the material aspect of non-traditional financial issues manifests itself not just in risks exposure to such issues as market externalities, climate change, and so forth, vulnerabilities in the supply chain, governance risks, political risks, but increasingly it spans the entire strategic operational context. And the term, Stephen, you mentioned before, VANUC, it was, I believe, in my sense also very much reflects that complexity. But it's a reality today that the material aspect of the non-financial environment within which globalizing corporations operate is increasingly manifested. Thirdly, business is not alone anymore. As I said, it's not just civil society, it is also other important professional service providers and other actors which have caught on or are catching on. One of the most important ones is obviously investors. They're still lagging behind, according to our view, behind the corporate world. The corporate world is far ahead on sustainability issues, but investors are catching up. Principles for Responsible Investment, now headquartered here in London, is a thriving platform with 800 institutional investors. They're very busy currently developing tools how analysts can better assess, integrate non-financial issues in investment assessment and evaluation. I believe this is a very important trend, a very important and welcome development. It will help to underscore the business case of responsibility in a significant way. Similar developments are going on in the consumer world worldwide, although there the trends are much more fragmented, and it depends very much which industry sector, product category, and which market we are talking about. But clearly, also on the consumer side, globally speaking, no doubt, with the appreciation of everything that has to do with the natural environment, with the increasing sense of interdependence and the vulnerability and the importance of proactive risk behavior, this sense is increasingly out there. So these are some of the big trends which are irrespective of geopolitical. Others are well known. I mean, Growth has migrated to the east by and large and to some other emerging markets. What is often overlooked is the second generation beyond the BRICS that are also emerging rapidly, and among them are important countries with sizable populations, Turkey, Indonesia, and so forth. There's a whole bunch of new countries entering the global market space with great ambitions, with young demographic populations, with a huge appetite. So it's this environment within which we're working, and now I want to speak just for 1 minute about the future.
All right.
All right, the optimistic side. The material aspects of non-financial issues, I believe, gives a big competitive advantage to corporations which have long practiced and built up competencies both at the strategic and at the operational level. I believe UK companies, European companies are especially well positioned to leverage that advantage further. It hasn't yet happened on a large enough scale, but I think that's one thing to come. Secondly, transformative partnerships, partnerships that go beyond normal cooperation, which have a long-term impact, that have lasting market transforming capacities are on the rise, and their definition and properties are increasingly important also for business success. Thirdly, I would argue that the most important of all is that we keep the world politically coherent and integrated. My sense is the biggest risk of all is the political risk of this world not being capable of moving into a future where there's space for everybody, and we don't see the world as a zero-sum game, but as an expanding opportunity for all. So I would leave you with a strong appeal also to see the political aspect. And again here, the UK is extremely well positioned to spearhead that assumption about the future and to thrive on it in market terms. 5 minutes, not a lot of time, but I hope I have shared some of the important ideas. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer more questions.
Brilliant. Grab a seat, Georg. Thank you very much. Can I say that's excellent for a man who deliberately doesn't wear a watch. I thought that was very good timekeeping. So that's I think, pretty positive global perspective from an organization. Let's hear next from a company, a global company, and from the Senior Vice President for Emerging Markets, Emerging Countries and Market Access at GlaxoSmithKline, Duncan Learmouth.
Okay, thank you, Guy. So our idea started with a question. So the biggest issue reputationally that faces the pharmaceutical industry and companies like GlaxoSmithKline is access to medicines for the poorest people on the globe. So how do we take that big reputational issue and turn it into a catalyst for different business thinking and actually use it as a business opportunity rather than a negative for the company? So the big idea that we embarked on from the 1st of August last year was to create a new operating unit within the company. And that operating unit brings together all the least developed country operations within GlaxoSmithKline, so that's 50 countries. And the unit is focused on building a lower priced, higher volume business within those countries that is sustainable. So that unit that benefits the business by building a bigger business for GSK, but also by supplying lower priced medicines, benefits patients at the same time. So what we had to do to make that big idea and make it into practice was really break apart a little bit the organization. So we took our businesses in Africa, our businesses in Asia, which had various geographical homes, and we broke that apart and put them all into one unit, and this is the unit that I now lead and have worked through from August last year. We put in new rules for the unit, so we have rules around pricing. So we basically said that all our pricing in this unit for patented medicines and vaccines, we should cap our prices at no more than 25% of the UK price. We had a rule around incentives, So instead of a revenue incentive for our executives and managers that work in this unit, we would have a volume incentive so that the business people will be actually focused more around volume and volume strategy than around revenue. We had a rule around longer-term investment horizons and payback, so that instead of relatively short 1 to 2 year paybacks for marketing investments and price changes, we would look at 3 to 4 year paybacks to encourage a longer-term horizon scanning and longer-term business planning for the unit to actually build the business for the future. And we would also have a rule around reinvestment, which is probably the most radical bit of the unit, which is that we will commit to reinvesting 20% of any of the profits that we make through this unit back into healthcare infrastructure in the least developed countries where we're operating. And I think for me, the biggest difference with the unit is that we're actually bringing together the access strategies that we put in place at the corporate level, above country if you like, and combining those with line management responsibility at the business level. And I think for me, it's only when you actually integrate the access policies and the policies around reputation with the line management of the business can you really hope to make a big change and a big difference. Otherwise, I really think you're always coming in and scratching around at the edges, and the business is always focused on something different. So unless you actually integrate your reputational challenges with your business, I don't think you will succeed. So that is really the biggest difference for the business. If I've got 1 minute, great. Just wanted to give you a bit of a flavor, really, of some of the areas that we're focusing on in terms of strategy for this business unit. So I'm going to quickly say 4 areas. The base point of the business is really builds from our vaccines business, which is already has that business model. It's a low-price, high-volume business with very active public-private partnerships. So the key to success for this developing countries business unit is building from the vaccines business and reinvesting the profits of that vaccines business in healthcare infrastructure and building the medicines business elsewhere within the country. Second issue is structural issues. When I go to DRC, Congo, into Kinshasa, and I pick up a very simple product, a very basic Ventolin inhaler for asthma, a life-saving product, been around since the late 1970s. In Kinshasa, that product will cost me $5 or $6 US dollars. If I go around the corner here in London as a private patient, that product will cost me $2.50, okay? So the structural issues that drive the price that's double the UK price are very significant. They're to do with a fragmentation of supply chain, they're to do with import duties, they're to do with unregulated markets, they're to do with low volume businesses with no economies of scale. So those structural challenges are areas that we really try and focus down on and decide what can we do to support reducing duty, what can we do to support formation of pharmacy boards that help to regulate the market, what can we do to have a more consistent supply chain, what can we do to lower our prices into DRC that can actually come through then to the patient. Third area is data and analytics. One of the biggest challenges in least developed countries is very little data to understand what the market dynamics are. The data is expensive to get. There isn't often the return on investment to actually generate that data. We're focusing much more now on understanding what the patient behaviors are, what the decision making is, what the cultural barriers are, so that we can actually design the right medicines, the right product portfolio at the right price point that actually meets patient demand much more tangibly and much more strategically than we have in the past. And then the fourth issue is around building a healthcare infrastructure. And here, we're one company. We're a big company, but we're only a small percentage of the pharmaceutical market, about 7%. So we can't do everything by ourselves, but what we can do is perform a catalytic role, and I hope a leadership role, in making a difference to health infrastructure. So we look at supporting, with our 20% reinvestment, healthcare worker training, because we believe that's a very sustainable area of capacity building. We look at supporting more active private sector delivery models that in some cases supplement, or in some cases can be a lot better than the government healthcare delivery models, because they encourage a more entrepreneurial and much more active and engaged society to deliver healthcare with incentives that go with that. And then thirdly, we look at technology and investing in technology in areas like telemedicine for remote areas, and in text messaging, SMS messaging for counterfeit prevention. So there's a lot going on. It's early days. We're a kind of learning unit, but we're evolving, I think, very rapidly. We are learning a lot, and it's a great unit for actually learning within the organization. So we're already testing out a number of areas like the volume incentive and seeing, well, actually, how does that work in this developing countries unit, and therefore what learnings can we take for the wider GSK organization. So thanks for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's kind of weird to hear such fascinating stuff crammed into what was actually 8 minutes. But we do want to get to questions, so I just want to say thank you to everybody who's spoken and is yet to speak for being so brief. So let's move, excuse me, let's move on now and hear from our next speaker, who is the Chief Executive of the National Grid and a good friend of business of the community, Stephen Holliday.
Good morning. Morning. That sounded like a challenge. I need to do it in 3 minutes then, Guy. That's obviously it. I will be brief. I'll talk about an opportunity and an issue. Skills. Huge opportunity in my day job at National Grid. Some of the things that Peter was talking about. You know, how do we get the technology skills that we need for the future to handle these enormous energy challenges, the replacing of old energy infrastructure around the world, and the green agenda, an enormous shortage. In my part-time job with BITC as well, the agenda that we've got to try and focus the efforts of BITC, that does a lot of great work around the country on skills, locally and with businesses, to get really focused on a couple of things to make an enormous difference at the moment. There are 3 areas that is focused on. Getting businesses to play a more responsible role in the community with schools and with local community leaders. The first of those is what we call work inspiration. How do we convert work experience in the UK? It's a fantastic idea to get kids of 13 and 14 to understand what work is all about, and to help them very early in their lives to understand the sort of things, therefore, they need to think about in their choices in their education at the right time in their career. But our track record is appalling. It's a dull week or a dull 2 weeks in a business. So how can we turn that into not experience but inspiration? We have an objective this year to get 200,000 kids through an experience in schools in the UK that truly is inspirational for them. That's action number 1. And businesses have to play an enormous part in that. Action number 2 is this bridging of, interestingly, as you well know, the stats are quite frightening. Between 18 and 25-year-olds, we have 20% plus unemployed. In fact, in parts of the country, that number is as high as 50% unemployment. We have a bubbling social issue in this country that is costing us today an enormous amount of money, and it's likely to cost us even more in the future. And part of that reason, of course, is those kids don't have the aptitude nor the right training. So another big piece of activity is around how can we get people who are not in the workplace today into the workplace. Real focused programs, real good guidance from BITC about this is what good practice looks like. This is how you do it. Help facilitate businesses, not just big businesses, but small SMEs as well, to play a part in getting people back into the workplace. The third area of real focus and a passion of mine is We have to work more closely as business with schools. There's a divide that has developed. I was telling Guy about earlier. BITC ran last year the big conversation, which was all around talking with 15 and 16 and 17-year-olds about business. And one of the most extraordinary bits of feedback that came back from kids at the end of the day, it had a great day, great experience, a lot of fun, lots of bits of feedback, but one consistency was, oh, it's interesting. These people from business aren't quite so bad. Which is quite frightening about, well, where in their life was this injection of thought that actually business was about bad and not about doing good in life. So a huge issue to try and influence that, and that has to be influenced through head teachers and teachers. So there is an enormous challenge on businesses to rebuild the relationship with schools that used to exist some time ago, actually, particularly a challenge to try and get into the 3,000 secondary schools in the UK and the 500 most challenged, a relationship between local businesses and head teachers. And my passion then, back to my day job, is we need loads of scientists and technologists and engineers. And they're not being provided today. So how can we help the teaching community understand the needs of business in the future? 58% of all new jobs that are going to be created in the UK between today and 2020 require STEM education. Today, we're probably actually qualifying about 17% to the level that we need to. So this is a great opportunity and a great challenge that meets as well a social imperative where business just is going to have to play a larger part in meeting its own needs, but helping to ensure that we don't get a generation that is out of work and is incorrectly trained. Thank you.
Well done. Yep. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. That was less than 5 minutes, which is particularly brilliant. So we've heard from a global organization, and we've heard from 2 companies. Now we're going to hear from somebody who talks to a lot of companies and spends a lot of time with a lot of companies. He is currently the senior partner, or a senior partner, but he will, from June, I think, be the chief executive of Deloitte, the management consultants, and his name is David Sproul.
Good morning. Thank you, Guy. It's obviously an honor and a privilege for us to be sponsoring this convention. I'll try and be as brief as Stephen was, and part of it is because part of my big idea will echo some of Stephen's comments as well about employability. But let me just have a couple of introductory comments, because I think the business world does stand at a crossroads today, and as I talk to boardrooms around the world, there is a very clear uncertainty about where we go. And in the aftermath of the financial crisis, business does need to be trusted more by our clients, our shareholders, and our employees. And we need to rebuild that belief in the integrity of business. We need to rebuild that trust in business for us to be successful and to be an important part of society. So business should be thinking again about its central purpose and social impact of every strategic decision we make, of those we've already heard about this morning. But what I'd like to focus on, and what is our big idea in Deloitte, is actually people, and as I echo some of Stephen's comments. And it's more important to me now, as I take on the role of CEO of Deloitte, an organization with 15,000 people in the UK, 150,000 globally, that we really do think about that. And as leaders, we always say that getting the best people, the right people, is critically important for us. It's a strategic imperative. We complain there aren't enough of the right skills. There aren't enough people applying for the jobs that we have. We go out of our way to research what drives talent. How do we retain and attract the smartest people? What does Generation Y want from a career? And all these questions are important, but perhaps we should start asking different questions. And as an organization, we're now starting to ask very different questions. What are we doing as business to create opportunities for the young people of today? Are we contributing enough to the community? As was said earlier, how do we inspire interest at an early age and foster the right conditions to enable more diverse groups to be attracted to business? And are we creating and supporting the right education and skill building initiatives and opportunities? Because if we create more opportunities for young people, then in the long term we'll have a much better chance of building the diverse talent pool that we as business and society needs. Young people, particularly from disadvantaged backgrounds, need help to acquire the right skills if they're to reach their potential. Employers also need to consider the value of a wide range of skills than just pure technical skills. And as one way to address this need, Deloitte has set up a number of programs. I just want to touch on 2 or 3 of them to illustrate the opportunity. The first is that as an organization which historically has tended to recruit solely graduates, we have this year brought in a program to start recruiting A-level students into our professional work streams. There are many, many very able students who want to take a career from A-level, who don't want to go to university, don't want to take on the burden of the fees that are coming in, and don't want to take on the burden and the risk of unemployment. And therefore we now have people out there in schools across the country looking to attract this first group of A-level students to join us. It's only 200 this first year, but we see that being very important and building over time. Secondly, in another scheme, we've invested over $3 million working with further education colleges, universities and major UK employers in building employability skills. The Deloitte Employability course is now an accredited course. It builds those employability skills in terms of interview training, presentation skills alongside vocational training. And it's skilling people up to join careers in IT, in retail, in hospitality, and occasionally in professional services where we are. On a global basis, we've got a program called Deloitte 21 to develop underserved students' skills so they become leaders and entrepreneurs in the business community. Enabling young people to understand the link between the classroom and business is critically important. Now, of course, other organizations have different business models to attract and to focus on that market. But for us, employability and education is critical. And so from our point of view, where we see the role is to take those programs and to take them into schools, much as the way has been described already. To spend more time on mentoring, to spend more time in schools, working with schools, building skills, and building employment skills as well as technical skills, so that young people have a greater opportunity to pursue careers. So we approach and attack that problem that the government talks about in terms of youth unemployment in a way that creates both opportunity for our people, opportunity for society, and creates a better pool of talent for Deloitte. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, David. So we have one more speaker, and then we'll be opening the floor to questions. Obviously, companies are doing everything they can in these areas. Often they need help from outside, and one of the organizations they turn to is Groundwork, and we can hear from the Chief Executive of Groundwork now, Tony Hawkhead.
I know what you're thinking. I'm standing between you and the questions and coffee. First of all, happy St. Patrick's Day. It's on this day a few years ago when I learned one of the most valuable lessons of my business life. Do not accept invitations to visit your colleagues in Belfast on St. Patrick's Day. I still can't remember. I've got 2 ideas for the price of 1, or 2 challenges if you like. The first is that overnight I've been exchanging emails with Groundwork colleagues in Japan. Some of them work north of Tokyo, so very close to some of the worst of the trouble. And the Groundwork operations in Japan are very small, they're largely volunteer-driven, they're quite extraordinary really because only 15 or 20 years ago there was no civil society landscape in Japan. It was basically the public sector and the private sector. They've got going quickly, and at this moment in time they're doing 2 or 3 things very simply. One, they're actually getting water, spring water from where they are into some of the worst affected areas. The second thing they're doing is providing opportunities for some of the children to get out where they can get transport and doing some groundwork sort of environmental things with them. And the third thing, which I thought was most extraordinary, is that they're already thinking about life afterwards and what can be done to turn what is not only a terrible people disaster, but also increasingly a terrible environmental disaster, into something that can be better and more positive. And if any of you are interested in doing something, if you're thinking, what can I do about Japan, do talk to